G'day, ZiggyD here. I'm currently filming in the alpha for Path of Exile's 3.0 Fall of Oriath expansion. In this video, I want to show some interesting things to look out for in 3.0. A new minimap, new Bandit quest rewards, and a new keystone. This video is relatively spoiler-free, so don't worry. It won't contain any plot, bosses, monsters, or new zones. Just mechanics and features, basically. So the first thing I wanted to showcase is this new map. 3.0's new map is super sexy and refined compared to the old one. Massive leaps ahead for this thing, from this thing we've had for years now. Also, the important thing that, because some of you guys might have seen this, but the important thing that hasn't been shown off yet is the new sliders for map transparency. So we have the map transparency slider, which shows actual map features like walls and doors and various doodads like this thing in here, in kind of this like 3D modeled style. Then the map overlay transparency covers this overlay which shows pathable terrain and explored areas. So using these two sliders, you can go for multiple different styles of maps to suit your taste. You can go for a highly detailed map like this, or you can go for a much simpler, just pathable terrain style map. Or you can even do some sort of hybrid of the two where you have just a light kind of shading of the map elements and then mostly showing strongly the pathable areas of terrain. And then you can see as you explore out how it reveals just these lightly shaded sections and the pathable area that you've actually explored. Such a nice new addition. Now the next thing I wanted to show off is the new Bandit quest rewards. Now since we only have one difficulty, we don't have the 3 repeats of the Bandit quests in Act 2. As such, the Bandits in Act 2 are far more rewarding with multiple effects each. So siding with Creighton gives you 6% increased attack and cast speed, 3% attack dodge, and 6% increased move speed. Siding with Alira gives you 5 flat mana regen, 20% global crit, and 15% all res. And then siding with Oak gives you 1% life regen, 2% physical damage mitigation, and 20% increased physical damage dealt. And then if you kill all 3 of them, you get 2 passive skill points. Now note that these particular stats are as of the alpha and start of the beta, so they may well change before launch. Especially because I think that the Oak one is a bit weaker compared to the other two. I think the Oak one's going to be a little niche, kind of used by like your Righteous Fire characters who want that extra regen, and maybe by like lab runners that want more mitigation perhaps. But I don't know, it doesn't seem quite as powerful as the other ones, apart from that life regen for, you know, Righteous Fire builds essentially. On the other hand, Alira is going to be used by any crit build. That crit multi plus flat mana regen is very nice, and 15 all res is certainly not bad either. And then Creighton, I think, is going to get used by probably every other non-crit build. You know, a lot of builds that would take Oak, I think would just take Creighton instead, because 20% increased fizz damage, a little bit of fizz mitigation. I mean, you can take 3% dodge, that's not even bad on an armor build, right? 3% flat avoidance is fine. And then 6% attack speed and 6% move speed's the big one, right? Like, that's your clear speed, obviously. So I think a lot of builds are going to go with Creighton under these current stats, crit builds with Alira, and then just some specific builds going with Oak. That's at least kind of my initial impressions. So again, these might well change. Nonetheless, these are far more interesting and rewarding now. The third and final thing I want to show off in this video is the new keystone, Perfect Agony. This is located between the Shadow Sign and Ranger areas, and what this keystone does is it makes you deal 25% less damage on your actual hits. But then it allows 75% of your additional critical damage multiplier to scale your damage over time ailments from critical strikes. It's a little confusing sounding, so what this means is that with the new damage over time changes in 3.0, your ignites, bleeds, and poisons aren't created by the damage of a hit anymore. They're actually a completely separate listed stat. You can see here just on default attack, and it lists this on all attacks that could potentially cause some sort of ailment. It's got bleeding, ignite, and poison damage just listed as actual damage amounts, because these are no longer created by the hit like they were previously. They're a completely separate role. So what this means is that with this keystone, you won't deal as much upfront damage, but your bleeds, poisons, and ignites will be much stronger, so long as they're created on a crit. This, I think, will spawn a new type of build, crit damage over time builds that backload their damage, rather than in the past where your damage was front-loaded and then the scaling was just kind of like a lot of extra damage on top of that. I mean, damage over time builds are going to be a lot weaker than their double dipping counterparts pre 3.0. But under the new 3.0 meta, these sort of backloaded damage over time builds could be kind of interesting. It's going to be difficult to say how good this is going to be exactly without some more testing, but it's definitely something to consider trying out in the beta. I'm personally pretty excited by the idea of builds that don't do that much initial hit damage, but backload a lot of that damage over time. Like, for example, some sort of puncture build that just like, you know, the projectiles just kind of pierce through and they don't really do all that much damage, but then the degen just slaughters and just melts the enemies. That sounds like it could be a pretty satisfying and different feeling playstyle. The problem with this keystone is definitely going to be that, unlike some other keystones, like Elemental Overload and so on, it's not really something you can use for leveling. Unless you're using a lot of like leveling gear that has a lot of crit stuff on it. This is only going to be pretty useful late game once your crit chance is getting very high. And you know, you can see kind of your late game assassins taking this sort of thing. But you're definitely not going to pick this up at like level 20 something. It's just going to lower your damage and not really do anything useful for you. It could be a bit of a noob trap in that way. Anyway, I'll make sure to report in with a deeper analysis of this keystone and damage over time builds once I've had a chance to test it more in the beta. Anyway guys, I'm curious to know your thoughts on the new minimap UI, the new Bandit quest rewards, or the new keystone Perfect Agony. Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to keep an eye out for my upcoming beta content here on YouTube, and I'm also going to be streaming a butt ton, so if you want to click on over to Twitch, come hang out. Anyway guys, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.